Hi folks. Today I'm going to start us off with a reading from The Habits of the Creative Mind as a way to begin our Thursday lecture and the completion of week 5. If you wanted to follow along, I'm on page 228 at the top, and it's the section called On Argument as Journey. When professors assign papers in college classes, they typically expect their students to hand in essays that make an argument. What they mean by an argument, however, isn't always clear to the students. Many of our students arrive in our classes believing that writing an argument is like participating in a debate. They pick a side, their thesis. They gather evidence to support the side they've chosen, and they write as if trying to show that they are right and the other side is wrong. Winning, or getting a good grade, is the goal, not thoughtfulness, not discovery, not learning. Now, I think that is a little bit of a gross estimation of what happens with most developing writers, namely you all. That, of course, there is some thoughtfulness in there. In many cases, there's a lot of thoughtfulness. There is discovery, there is learning. But I think what the Habits text is saying, and the writers of the Habits text are saying, is that we tend to prioritize this idea of performing what is right, trying to prove something, right or wrong, and ultimately thinking about the result of that, which is, in an academic setting, a good grade. And that while we unfortunately live in a late capitalist era where everything is about the product, which does tend to obscure the more discovery-laden aspects of scholarship and learning, there is a way that we can do this, that we can do both. And in fact, if we put more of the emphasis on the discovery, typically that makes for a more compelling argument, because it is not so much that we are trying to prove something as it is we're trying to understand something. And when we do the latter, we tend to embrace the complexities of the ideas that surround a controversy or an issue. We have to remember something. There is a reason why there isn't an absolute answer to most things. And certainly our essays are not going to provide that, right? What they are going to provide is the unique perspective of a particular individual who thinks in a certain way and who has gathered and amalgamated a certain amount of data, a certain kind of data, and have considered it in a very nuanced way. And even though that seems like you might just be pissing into the fire, that is contributing to the complexity of the overall ideas and questions. It populates more considerations, which allow for better answers. Not the right answer, but better answers. And that is what all essays do in their contribution to scholarship, in their contribution to kind of developing us as thinkers and as citizens. So, what is being said in this chapter is very similar to what we've been talking about in a more kind of colloquial way all quarter. We've been talking about research as a journey, right? That we are going down the rabbit hole and then we come across another piece of information and that inspires us to go in another direction. And for us to listen to that, because that tends to be more of an accurate mapping of our own particular way of thinking, which is exactly what we're trying to do, while also adhering to certain kind of parameters around what we believe as a culture to be good scholarship. But now we also want to document our argument as a discovery along that journey. So in many cases, even though we are curating information, we are also presenting our essay as if our reader is discovering the information along with us. That narrative structure largely is what activates the imagination of American scholars, at least, and certainly we can think beyond that. I'm moving to page 235. I love this section. It's called On the Theater of the Mind. So, if anything, maybe go back and overskim this section. It's only a couple pages, but the writers are summoning all kinds of ideas in this On the Theater of the Mind section, including Plato's cave allegory, which I'm sure you all are familiar with. At the very bottom, the writers say, when you write, you also shape an experience in the minds of your readers. Your words stage the unfolding of an idea or an argument or a narrative. And our essays can do that. You shape the idea by combining the journey of the research with a way to reach your audience. And it is through this process of writing where you can keep unlocking levels of your ideas. Kind of like if you're playing one of those video games where you have to achieve a certain score or goal, and all of a sudden another world becomes unlocked that you can explore. When you present an essay like that, you intrigue the reader. Now, granted, the age-old structure of the 5-paragraph essay where you front load with your thesis and you present all the information as if it is expositional and in support of the thesis. There is nothing wrong with that. It is conveying data in a way that potentially could persuade. However, when you combine the skill set of that kind of structure with a writing style that also allows it to not feel like you've already figured it out, but that you are figuring it out on the way to the end. Of course, you already know the answer, but you are presenting it as if it is a journey. You allow the readers to experience what you experienced in your research. And that activates, once again, the critical imagination. And so we want to think about ways that we can do that for our readers. One of the most important aspects to being able to figure out how to shape that idea in the writing of the paper, in the presentation of the information, is to know who your audience is. Meaning that you must choose an audience. 1. By choosing an audience, it inspires you to empathize with your readers' ideologies and their values. You can immediately conceive of what they think about, right? What their values are. And you can make presumptions, aka warrants, in your paper. Haha, Tolman schema comes back, yes? Where you can create warrants in your paper that utilize the kind of the valuations and ideologies and judgments of your presumed audience. It allows you to connect to them better, and it also allows you to complete your logical structure in such a way that could be efficacious for this particular group in order to be persuasive. It also, by choosing your audience, allows you to strategize your intros, the ordering of your ideas, and your conclusions. So you can be thinking about their common experiences. You can be thinking about the language that they utilize in order to navigate ideas in their world. And certainly anything that might be fascinating to them, you can summon into your work for qualitative and comparative data that kind of brings the paper to life. Okay? These are things I want you to be thinking about as you map out a potential theater of the mind of your essay, which of course is the main assignment for this week, this argument visualization. Think about who your audience is and allow that to maybe even shape how you construct that map that you come up with or that visualization. Maybe even think about how it can contribute to tone. And by doing all of this, you might even more resolutely figure out who it is you want to write this essay to. We'll talk more about audience as time goes on, but I really want you to be thinking about this. We will certainly talk about it in our one-on-one conferences next week. So your discussion question for this week is, like I mentioned in the Tuesday lecture, is to apply this idea of visualizing an argument by mapping out one that already exists. So you are to read Soja's Inside Exopolis, and I'm asking you to make a visualization of this already established argument as a way for you to begin thinking about this theater of the mind and how you might be able to apply it to the conceptions of your own paper. So the considerations to have when visualizing Exopolis. What does the shape of this argument look like? I know that's abstract, but go there. I promise this isn't me being metaphysical. It's actually a way for your mind, the neural pathways, to activate in places that typically aren't activated by scholarship. But if we use more of our mind, we actually will probably create a more interesting and compelling argument. Okay? So think about this. There is an architectonics to all things. There is a design to all things. There is a shape to all things. Even elements as abstract as an idea or an argumentation. So allow yourself to reify this abstraction. Give it a shape. Okay? Then also in the visualization, identify the main points of Soja's article. You could think of them as points of interest, or you can think of them as destinations if you were creating something like a map. Where does this argument ultimately lead? Think about that. And then also, who is the intended audience? Reflect that somehow in the visualization, maybe through the medium choice that you use, or the style that you use, or whatever kind of tropes that you're kind of building off of. For example, if you were to map Inside Exopolis, if you were to utilize a map, but it was, let's say the intended audience was children. Well, you would think about a map that would be typically made for children, right? Maybe those points of interest have little images, right? Or if it was someone who was a lot more logical, you would probably make the map a little bit more about the gridded systems of the road arterials and the freeways. If this was, let's say, an environmentalist, you might think about the map being something that focused more on the variations in topography, right? You see what we're doing here? This is the idea of choosing the intended audience. And by doing this, you begin to understand in this most intuitively visual way, which is the way we are ultimately. Remember, 70% of our nerve endings are clustered in our eyes. We begin to intuitively understand the tone that we want our arguments to embody. And of course, we're doing this by trying to determine what the tone of Soja's Inside Exopolis is. All right. You're going to be presenting this image, this visualization, in whatever way you determine that to be most effective for you as your post for the discussion question. Let's see what it looks like. Don't worry, you don't have to be a masterful artist. That's not what this is about. I don't want you spending too much time on execution. I want you to spend it on the way that you're imagining this kind of visualization to look like, right? And then by activating this aspect of your own criticality, I want you to then try to apply it to your own research project, knowing full well that it could possibly and very well change, right? It's just a beginning to get us going. Awesome. Remember that you are documenting your journey through the argument that you make. So keep thinking about that as you're imagining working on this project that might seem odd, okay? Just remember that the visualization allows you to shape your argument, to not be as rigid as an outline. It allows you to experiment with ordering. It allows you to play. And that is really necessary in the creation of an essay, right? The revision process is where you kind of tighten it up and make sure that it is purely logical and sound. But first you got to create the thing. Cool? Have fun with this. I can't wait to see what you come up with both in the discussion and in the visualization by the end of the weekend. And then also remember to sign up for conferences. We jump into those at the very beginning of next week so that you have more time to work on that first draft, which is coming up at the end of next weekend already. Have fun, you all. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Good luck.